Driving at night has its own feel. The roads stretch out into darkness. The hum of the tires is steady, and the headlights carve tunnels through the black. Out in the hill country of Texas, it feels even more empty. Wide stretches of ranch land on either side, fences rolling with the land, and hardly a house light in sight. That kind of silence and emptiness can be peaceful, but it can also turn on you in an instant. I learned that the hard way one night when I was driving through those back roads. It was the middle of the night, not quite 3 in the morning. I had been on the road for hours, and the last town I passed was miles behind me. The highway twisted and dipped through the hills, the kind of road where you can go miles without passing anyone. My headlights swept across bends and my mirrors showed nothing but darkness. I felt like I was alone out there, and part of me liked it. The air was cool, the radio was low, and I was making good time. That changed when a pair of headlights appeared behind me. At first, they were distant. I saw them crest a hill and thought nothing of it. Cars appear from nowhere at night all the time. But within a minute they were on me, closer than they had any reason to be. The glare filled my rearview mirror, too bright, washing everything else out. They rode my bumper so close I couldn't see their grille. I tapped my brakes lightly, hoping they'd back off. They didn't. Instead, they held steady right on me every curve of the road, every dip. My knuckles were tight on the wheel. Out there, with no one else around, being tailgated like that was enough to make my skin crawl. Then they suddenly swung out and flew past me. The engine roared as they pulled into the other lane and cut in front of me. I expected them to take off into the night, but they didn't. Instead, they slowed down. Not just a little. They eased off until I was forced to hit my brakes hard to avoid rear-ending them. My seatbelt locked as I jolted forward, heart pounding. I thought maybe it was just some drunk driver messing around, but then I tried to pass. I signaled, pulled into the left lane, and pressed the gas. The moment I started to get even with them, they sped up, matching me. I pushed harder, but so did they. I backed off, slipped back behind, thinking I'd let them go. As soon as I did, they slowed again, dropping down nearly to a crawl in the middle of the highway. It was a game and I was stuck in it. I tried again, picking my moment when the road opened up ahead. I floored it, sliding into the left lane, heart hammering in my chest. For a second, I thought I'd made it. I pulled past their rear fender, halfway alongside them, but they surged forward, keeping me pinned in the other lane. A blind curve was coming up, and I had no choice but to brake hard and slip back behind them. My tires squealed against the pavement, and I felt my stomach drop. Once again, their taillights glowed red as they slowed nearly to a stop. Couldn't wrap my head around it. Were they drunk? Were they trying to start something? Out there, in the dead of night, it didn't matter why. All I knew was that I had to get away. For the next miles, it repeated. They'd slow, I'd try to pass. They'd block me. If I managed to get in front, they'd ride my bumper until they could blow past and cut me off again. Over and over, the same pattern. The emptiness of the road made it worse. If there had been other cars, maybe I'd have felt safer. But there was no one. Just me, them, and miles of blacktop twisting through the hills. My chest was tight, and my hands were slick with sweat on the wheel. Every instinct told me not to stop, not to pull over. Stopping out there would leave me wide open. I kept scanning the road for anything. A gas station, a lit-up house, even another car. But there was nothing, just darkness pressing in on both sides. At one point, we hit a straight stretch, and I saw a sign for an upcoming rest area. Relief surged through me. I thought if I could just get there, I could find other people, lights, maybe even a camera or two. I stayed steady, tried not to let on that I was aiming for it. The other car kept their game going, slowing and speeding, until the exit came up. I didn't signal. I just yanked the wheel at the last second and shot down the off-ramp. My tires screeched as I took the turn too fast, heart pounding. I half expected them to follow, but when I glanced in the mirror, their headlights flew past, continuing down the highway. They didn't slow. They didn't turn. They just kept going, swallowed up by the dark. I pulled into the rest area and parked under the brightest light I could find. My hands shook as I turned the engine off. The place was empty, Not a soul around, but at least it was lit. I sat there for a long while, trying to calm down, watching the road where they'd gone. The silence pressed heavy on me, and my body buzzed with leftover fear. Eventually, I got back on the highway, cautious, scanning every mirror, every shadow. I never saw their headlights again. Whoever they were, they'd had their fun or whatever their goal was and moved on. But that drive stuck with me. It wasn't just the danger of an accident, though that was bad enough. It was the way they controlled the road, the way they singled me out in the middle of nowhere, keeping me boxed in, never letting me escape. It felt intentional, like they knew exactly what they were doing. Whether it was some twisted game, a setup for something worse, or just reckless cruelty, I'll never know. But now, every time I'm out on those dark Texas roads, I think about that night. I think about their headlights burning in my mirror, their taillights glowing red as they slowed again and again, and how easily it could have ended differently. What saved me wasn't luck. It was refusing to stop in the dark, refusing to play their game any longer. I learned that night that on an empty highway, sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't the road itself. It's the other driver, the one who makes sure you never forget just how alone you really are. Night driving has always been something I didn't mind. The highways are emptier, there's less noise, and I can get into a rhythm. But I've also learned that nighttime has its own dangers, the kind that you don't always expect until you've lived through them. One particular drive still sticks with me, and it changed how I look at people on the road forever. It was late, past midnight, and I had been pushing through a stretch of highway that cut through small towns and long stretches of nothing. The road was flat and dark, with only the occasional passing semi or the faint glow of distant farmhouses. My headlights carved out a tunnel in front of me, and beyond that was just blackness, the kind of dark that eats everything up. I was tired, but not so tired that I should have been seeing things. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight, and I had the radio low just to keep myself awake. Somewhere outside one of those nameless towns, a car pulled in behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. People pass each other on back roads all the time, but this one stayed back just far enough that I couldn't see its details, only the glow of its headlights in my mirror. Too far to tailgate, too close to ignore. I figured they'd pass me soon, but they didn't. Mile after mile, they stuck right there, keeping the same pace. Started to bother me after a while. When you're out there at night, you start thinking about every possibility. I thought maybe they were just nervous about driving fast in the dark. Maybe they didn't know the roads. But then the car edged closer, just enough to make me feel its presence. Then it backed off again, then closer, like whoever was behind the wheel couldn't make up their mind. I slowed a little, thinking they'd take the chance to pass, but they slowed too. I sped up and they matched me. That's when my nerves really kicked in. I had no idea what they wanted, but they weren't just driving by coincidence anymore. Another mile or so down, they finally pulled up alongside me. I glanced over, quick, and all I could make out was a dark shape in the driver's seat. They motioned with their arm, pointing at my car. I couldn't hear them, but I could see their hand gestures, pointing down toward my tires. Over and over, they made the same motion, like they were trying to tell me I had a problem. For a second, my stomach dropped. Out there, the thought of having a blown tire or something dragging under the car was a nightmare. But I didn't feel anything wrong in the steering, no pulling, no wobbling. The car felt fine. Still, they kept pointing more aggressively now, like they were urging me to pull over. That's when I noticed something else. Up ahead, on the right side of the road, there was a small gas station. The neon sign was buzzing faintly, and a couple of lights lit up the pumps. It was too convenient. The timing, the way they suddenly appeared, the way they were pushing me to stop. It all clicked together in my head. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to get me to pull in. I gripped the wheel tighter and shook my head, staring forward, pretending not to see them. They slowed a little, then dropped back behind me again. My heart was hammering now. The gas station was coming up fast, and I could see it clearer as I got closer. It wasn't even open, just lights left on, pumps standing there like skeletons. The kind of place you'd be isolated the second you pulled in. Sure enough, when I passed the entrance without turning, The car behind me swerved a little, like they hadn't expected it. Then they followed again, headlights locked on me. My throat felt dry, and I could feel sweat under my palms. Every instinct I had told me not to stop, not even for a second. I grabbed my phone and put it up to my ear, acting like I was making a call. My hand shook, but I kept it steady enough to make it look real. In the mirror, I could see the car still behind me, still pacing me, but now they seemed to hesitate. I kept the phone at my ear, kept glancing around like I was talking to someone, like someone else knew exactly where I was. For another couple of miles, they stuck with me. My nerves were on edge, and every bump in the road made me jump. I scanned for exits, side roads, anything that might give me a way out. Then, just as suddenly as they had shown up, they veered off. No signal, no warning. They swerved across the road and turned down a side street, disappearing into the dark. I didn't let myself relax right away. I kept driving, farther than I needed to, checking the mirrors every few seconds. Even when the road was empty again, my body stayed tense, like I expected them to come back at any moment. It wasn't until I hit the lights of the next real town that I finally pulled into a 24-hour gas station. One with people around, cameras, and bright fluorescent lighting. I got out, walked around my car, checked everything. Tires were fine, nothing dragging, nothing wrong at all. They'd been lying the whole time, trying to bait me. Whether it was for insurance fraud, a mugging, or a carjacking, I'll never know. But I know for certain that if I had pulled into that dark little station, I wouldn't have walked away easy. That drive taught me something I don't forget. At night, when the roads are empty and strangers act too interested in your car, you can't afford to give them the benefit of the doubt. Not everyone out there is trying to help. Sometimes, they're trying to find the perfect moment to catch you when you're vulnerable. Now, when someone points at my car or tries to wave me down, I don't take chances. I keep moving until I find somewhere safe, somewhere bright, somewhere with other people. Because out on a night road, miles from anyone, stopping for the wrong person can mean you never get back on the road again. And even though that night is behind me, I can still see that driver's hand pointing down, urging me to pull off, like it's burned into my memory. A gesture that seemed helpful on the surface, but in the middle of nowhere, it carried nothing but danger. Night driving is something I've done more times than I can count, but I'll never forget one night where I realized just how quickly the road can turn against you. It wasn't bad weather or a breakdown that made it terrifying. It was another driver. I was heading home late after a long day, out on one of those stretches of highway where towns are far apart and the road is mostly empty. The sky was black except for a sliver of moon, and the land on either side of me was flat and endless. Fences, empty fields, an occasional barn light way out in the distance. That was all. My headlights cut ahead into the dark, and the hum of the tires kept a steady rhythm. I was tired but alert, wanting nothing more than to get home and crash in bed. That's when I noticed headlights behind me. At first, they were distant, just another car out there. But before long, they had pulled right up on my bumper, close enough that their beams filled my mirrors. The light was so bright I couldn't see anything else behind me. I tapped my brakes lightly, hoping they'd get the hint and back off. They didn't. Instead, they stuck there, riding me close for miles. My shoulders tensed, and I could feel my grip on the wheel tightening. Out on an empty highway in the middle of the night, that kind of tailgating doesn't feel like normal bad driving. It feels deliberate. Then they suddenly swerved out into the other lane and sped past me. The car shot forward, and I thought that was it. They were just in a hurry. But as soon as they got ahead of me, they slowed down. First a little, then more, until I had to hit my brakes to avoid rear-ending them. Their taillights glowed bright red, steady and slow, holding me there. I tried to pass, pulling into the left lane to go around. The moment I did, they sped up, matching me. I pressed harder on the gas, but they kept their pace. I dropped back, frustrated, and they slowed again, forcing me to crawl behind them. It was clear by then, this wasn't random. They were toying with me. My heart started to hammer in my chest. I looked around, hoping for another set of headlights, but the road was empty except for the two of us. No exits, no gas stations, no signs of life in either direction. just dark road and their car keeping me pinned. I tried again, this time flooring it when I saw a long stretch open up. My engine roared, and I managed to pull even with their back door, but they sped up again, not letting me pass. We raced side by side for a few seconds, my nerves stretched tight, before I backed off and dropped in behind them again. My palms were sweaty on the wheel, and I could feel that knot in my gut, the one that tells you something's wrong, something's dangerous. This went on for miles. They'd slow to a crawl, then floor it when I tried to pass. If I hung back far enough, they'd slow down until I caught up. If I got ahead, they'd tailgate me until they could swing around and cut me off again. Over and over, like a game they refused to end. At one point, the thought crossed my mind that maybe they were drunk or high, but the way they controlled the situation made me doubt that. This felt intentional, too precise. They wanted me stuck there, wanted me scared, and it worked. The worst part was the isolation. I couldn't see another car for miles, not ahead, not behind. Just the two of us locked in that stretch of road. It was the kind of loneliness where you realize how vulnerable you are, how easy it would be for something bad to happen and for no one to know until morning. I forced myself to breathe slow, to think. Stopping was out of the question. Pulling over on the shoulder would just give them the chance to box me in. I needed somewhere safe, somewhere with lights and people. So I stayed steady, watching every move they made, waiting for an out. Finally, I saw a sign, rest area, 2 miles ahead. Relief surged through me, though I didn't let it show. I kept my speed even, my eyes locked on the road. The car in front of me slowed again, crawling like they knew I was trapped. When the exit came up, I made my move. I didn't signal, didn't hesitate. I just cut hard and fast down the off-ramp. My tires squealed as I took the curve, adrenaline rushing through me. For a second, I thought they'd follow, but when I looked in the mirror, their headlights kept going, disappearing down the highway. I pulled into the rest area and parked under the brightest light I could find. My body was buzzing, my hands shaking as I sat there trying to calm down. The place was empty, not a soul in sight, but at least it was lit. At least I wasn't moving on a black road with nowhere to run. After a while, I got back on the highway. I drove slower, scanning my mirrors, but I never saw them again. It was like they'd vanished into the night the second I slipped away. I've thought about that night more times than I can count. Maybe it was just someone screwing around for kicks, trying to scare whoever happened to be on the road with them. Maybe that was their idea of fun. But out there, alone, it didn't feel like fun. It felt malicious. It felt like they were testing how far they could push before something worse happened. Since then, I don't look at late-night tailgaters the same way. I don't assume it's just bad driving or impatience. I keep my guard up, because when you're out on a dark highway with no one else around, you learn fast that the scariest thing on the road isn't the weather or the dark or even breaking down. It's the other driver, the one who decides you're their target for the night. And whether they were just playing games or something more sinister, the effect is the same. That night reminded me just how small and exposed one car can feel in the middle of nowhere, when someone else is determined to make sure you know you're not in control. I'll never forget that night drive out on Wadmalaw Island when I was a kid. It's burned into my memory sharper than most things from my childhood. At the time, I didn't fully understand the weight of what happened, but the feeling of fear, the heavy, choking kind of fear, stuck with me. Even years later, I can close my eyes and put myself right back there. It was one of those humid South Carolina nights in the summer, the kind where the air clings to your skin like a damp blanket. My dad had decided to take me and my brother out to shoot off some leftover fireworks. We had a small stash from the 4th of July, and he figured it would be a fun little late-night outing. He drove us out toward the Sticks, a boat landing on a creek that cut into the intracoastal waterway. Wadmalaw Island wasn't a place you went at night unless you had a reason. It was isolated, sparsely populated, and pitch black once you left the main roads. I remember staring out the window, watching tree branches loom overhead, the beams of the headlights catching patches of sand and gravel as the Audi rattled down the narrow road. When we pulled into the gravel lot of the landing, the first thing I noticed was how empty and still it seemed. But then my eyes adjusted, and I realized we weren't alone. Tied up at the dock was a power boat, maybe 20 feet long, rocking gently in the water. On the dock and in the parking area were several men. They all wore white boots that glowed faintly in the headlights. What stuck with me was how focused they were, moving box after box from the boat into the back of an SUV parked close to the water's edge. Nearby was a sleek sports car, dark and low to the ground, the kind of car that looked wildly out of place in that remote spot. The moment I saw it all, something inside me froze. The air felt charged, wrong. Even as a kid, I knew this wasn't normal. There was no noise except for the soft thud of boxes being loaded and the muffled splash of water against the boat. The men didn't even glance at us, but that almost made it worse. We weren't supposed to be there. We had driven into something we weren't meant to see. My dad didn't hesitate. He didn't even put the car in park. He just swung the Audi around in the lot, gravel spraying, and pointed us back out the way we came. My brother and I stayed quiet, but I could feel the tension pouring off him. He wasn't one to scare easily, but the way his hands gripped the wheel told me everything. We'd barely made it back onto the dark road, the trees closing in on both sides, when I noticed headlights behind us. At first, I thought maybe it was just another late-night driver, but the speed of it, the way it surged up out of the blackness, made my stomach twist. Within seconds, it was right there, a pair of beams filling the rearview mirror. Dad pushed the Audi hard. The speedometer climbed, 60, 70, 80, the little car shaking on the uneven asphalt. But the headlights stayed locked on us, closing the gap. I glanced over at my brother, his face pale in the dim glow from the dash. I could feel every bump of the road in my chest, every second stretching longer as that car behind us pressed closer. The thought settled in heavy, even for my young brain. This wasn't a coincidence. They weren't just leaving at the same time as us. They were chasing us. The Audi Fox wasn't built for outrunning much of anything, especially not something fast like the car behind us. My dad must have known that too. His shoulders were rigid, his eyes flicking between the road ahead and the mirror. The other car's headlights grew so bright it felt like they were burning holes into the back of my skull. The sound of their engine reached us even over our own, a deep growl that rose every time they pressed harder on the gas. The road twisted into a curve ahead, a blind bend swallowed by trees. That's when Dad made his move. Without warning, he killed the headlights and swerved hard into a narrow gravel driveway. The car jolted and rattled as it climbed the slight incline, the tires crunching like thunder in the silence. He pulled us as far into the shadow of the house as he could, then cut the engine. The world went black. We ducked low in our seats, holding our breath. I could hear my pulse hammering in my ears, and every little sound, crickets, the tick of cooling metal under the hood, was amplified in the silence. The headlights of the chasing car suddenly blasted past the road, washing over the trees and then disappearing as the car tore by at full speed. I caught a glimpse of it through the branches, and even though I couldn't make out the make or color, I could tell it was moving fast, a blur in the dark. For a few seconds, everything went still again. We sat there, crouched down, waiting. My chest ached from holding my breath. Then, in the distance, I saw it. The same headlights appeared again, this time heading back the way they'd come, racing toward the boat landing. The glow faded into the black, swallowed up by the trees. We didn't move right away. My dad kept us there for what felt like forever, making sure the coast was clear. When he finally restarted the car, the sound of the engine seemed so loud I was sure it would give us away. But the road was empty, the night quiet again, as if nothing had happened. We drove home in silence. I stared out the window, every shadow on the roadside feeling heavier than before, every bend in the road feeling like a place danger could reappear. When we finally pulled into our driveway and the porch light came into view, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Looking back on it now, as an adult, I realized exactly what we stumbled onto that night. That boat, the boxes, the boots, the SUV, the sports car, it had all the marks of a drug drop. Something smuggled in on the water, handed off quickly in the dark, far from any police or witnesses. We had no business being there, and the men working that night knew it. If we hadn't left when we did, if my dad hadn't thought to cut the lights and pull into that driveway, it could have ended very differently. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if the car had caught us, or if they had realized where we hid. Out on a back road in the middle of nowhere, no one would have heard a thing. No one would have found us until it was too late. The thought still gives me chills. That night taught me something important, even as a kid. There are things that happen in the dark corners of the world that you don't ever want to stumble into. Things you don't even think about until you accidentally see them, and suddenly you realize just how close danger can be. We were lucky, plain and simple. We drove away alive and untouched, able to tell the story years later. But the truth is, it could have gone the other way so easily. One wrong decision, one more minute spent at that landing, and I might not be here to remember it at all. I had been awake for almost 20 hours by the time I started that drive. My friend had a film project due, and we'd spent the entire night shooting scenes in some abandoned industrial lot on the edge of Brooklyn. By the time we wrapped up, it was close to 3 in the morning. I remember the air feeling damp, like it was holding on to the tail end of winter, even though spring was trying to settle in. The streets were mostly empty, the kind of emptiness that makes a city feel like a different place, like it's holding its breath. I was exhausted but wired at the same time. My head buzzed from the fluorescent lights we'd used all night, and I could still smell fake smoke from one of the shots clinging to my clothes. I dropped my friend off near his dorm, grabbed a coffee from a 24-hour deli that looked half asleep, and then started the drive back home. The route I took cut through a large city park. Not Central Park, but one of the other big ones that stretches between neighborhoods, with winding roads and patches of forest that make you forget you're still in New York City for a few minutes. The road through that park always made me uneasy at night. It was long and curved, with tall, old trees leaning toward the road as if trying to whisper to each other across it. The streetlights were spaced too far apart, so between each pool of light was a stretch of deep, solid darkness. Every so often, the headlights would catch a raccoon or a stray cat frozen in the middle of the road, their eyes glowing bright white for a split second before they darted away. I remember turning down that main stretch, past the rec center with the indoor pool. The building had big glass windows, and at that hour, the lights inside were off. The only thing visible was the reflection of my headlights gliding across the glass. I could see the faint blue tiles of the pool, dim and still, like a photograph of water. That was when it happened. At first, I thought I saw someone running, just a quick flash of motion in my peripheral vision, on the grass to the right of the road. It was fast, too fast. I looked straight ahead again, thinking I was just imagining things. I was tired. I kept telling myself that. The kind of tired where shadows start to look like people, and shapes move even when nothing is there. But as the headlights swept across the edge of the grass again, I saw it clearly. It was a person, or at least I thought it was. They were moving on all fours, but not like someone crawling. They were galloping, their hands and feet hitting the ground in a rhythm that looked impossible for a human body. The way their limbs bent didn't seem right, like their arms were longer than they should have been. Their back was arched, and their head was tilted downward as they moved. It was too quick and too fluid, like watching an animal that wasn't supposed to exist. I froze. My hands tightened on the steering wheel without me realizing it. My first thought was that maybe it was someone messing around, maybe a jogger or some kind of street performer, though that made no sense. Nobody would be out there at that hour, moving like that in near total darkness. I kept driving, slowly, my eyes locked on the mirrors. The figure darted from the grass toward the trees near the rec building and disappeared behind them. I thought about stopping, but something deep in me said not to. The idea of being outside the car in that silence made my chest tighten. The park around me seemed to go even quieter after that. No crickets, no wind, no sound from the city bleeding in. Just the low hum of the engine and the soft hiss of the tires on damp pavement. I drove the rest of the way through the park with my eyes flicking between the mirrors and the road ahead, half expecting that thing to reappear in the beams of the headlights. By the time I made it to the other side, where the trees thinned out and the first few streetlights of the neighborhood appeared, I could finally breathe again. I told myself that I was just tired, that exhaustion can do weird things to the mind. Hallucinations, light tricks, reflections. There were a dozen rational explanations, all of them easier to accept than what I thought I saw. When I got home, it was nearly 4 in the morning. The streets were still empty. I parked, sat in the car for a few seconds, and just listened to the ticking sound of the cooling engine. My hands were still trembling a little. I went inside, dropped my bag, and went straight to wash my face. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. My eyes were bloodshot, the skin under them pale. I looked like someone who'd been awake too long and seen something they couldn't quite understand. I didn't say anything about it for a while. I didn't want to sound crazy. The next morning, everything felt so normal that it almost embarrassed me that I'd been scared. I kept thinking maybe it was just a stray dog running weirdly, or maybe someone in a motion capture suit from one of the film projects near the park. My brain kept trying to file it away under something normal, something that made sense. But then I started noticing that it wasn't only me. Over time, I'd hear people mention strange things happening in that same park late at night. Runners who claimed they saw someone darting across the path on all fours. Cyclists who swore something chased their bikes for a short stretch before vanishing into the trees. Nobody had a good explanation. It wasn't a story that made the news or anything. It was just something people whispered about, the kind of thing that floats around in online threads and local forums. What unsettled me most wasn't the thought that it was something supernatural. It was the idea that maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a real person, someone who'd learned to move like that for reasons no one would ever understand. Someone who lived in those woods, hiding between the trees, watching the roads at night when the city slept. I started avoiding that route completely. Even in daylight, the park had this weight to it now. The shadows under the trees seemed to hold something just out of sight. A few months later, I drove past the park again, this time during the day, when it was full of joggers and families. I looked toward the same grassy area near the rec center, and everything looked normal: benches, playground equipment, a few people walking dogs. The kind of scene that makes you question every unsettling thing you've ever seen. But I couldn't unsee the image from that night. That unnatural movement, that wrongness in the way the body folded and unfolded as it ran. The way it had moved with confidence, like it wasn't lost or frightened, but like it belonged there. Sometimes I still drive late at night after long shoots, and whenever I pass through dark stretches of road, my eyes instinctively search the edges of the headlights. I tell myself it was nothing, just fatigue, a trick of light, maybe even a reflection from the car window. But deep down, there's a part of me that remembers the exact motion, the precise rhythm of its limbs hitting the ground, and how it disappeared behind those trees like it had done it 1,000 times before. It's been years since that night, but the memory hasn't faded. It's not the kind of thing that feels like a dream. It feels real, solid, like a moment carved into the dark part of my mind that refuses to be explained away. And the scariest part of all isn't what I saw. It's the possibility that it was a person. Because if it was, that means someone out there right now knows exactly what I saw, and they're still moving through those trees, waiting for the next car to pass. It was late, past midnight, when I started the drive back home through the back roads of North Hertfordshire. I'd stayed longer than I'd planned at a friend's place, one of those quiet evenings that stretch out with too much coffee and not enough reason to leave. The air outside was damp and cold, the kind of chill that seeps through your clothes no matter how warm it looked earlier in the day. The roads out there aren't the kind of roads you take unless you already know them. Narrow lanes that twist and rise through old farmland and wooded hills, with hedgerows so tall that they feel like walls pressing in on both sides. I always thought those roads were peaceful during the day, sunlight breaking through the trees, birds cutting across the fields, but at night, they're different. The kind of dark that swallows everything past the beam of your headlights. I remember passing through a stretch where the road dipped and curved sharply to the left, bordered by a dense patch of woods. It was one of those turns where you have to slow down no matter how well you know it. The headlights caught the wet glint of the tarmac ahead, the white lines disappearing under puddles from a shower earlier that evening. The wipers squeaked against the glass every few seconds, their sound the only thing keeping me grounded in the quiet. That's when I saw it. At first, it was just a shape sitting in the middle of the road, small, low to the ground, pale in the light. I thought it might have been a deer or maybe a dog. I eased off the gas, instinctively slowing down. The headlights swept over it fully, and for a split second, I saw the face. It wasn't an animal's face, not one I recognized. It was round and pale, almost human but wrong in ways that made my stomach tighten. The skin looked smooth and stretched too tight, and the nose was short and upturned, like a pig's snout pressed into the middle of a human face. The eyes reflected the light directly, round and glossy like glass. The thing just sat there, staring straight at the car, completely still. For a moment, I didn't move. The road was narrow enough that there wasn't much room to turn, and the trees pressed close on both sides. My brain tried to make sense of it. Some sort of animal, maybe deformed, maybe injured, but before I could react, it moved. It didn't run the way a person or an animal would. It scuttled fast and low across the tarmac, its limbs bending at strange angles. The motion was too sharp, too fast, like a spider or a crab. It crossed the beam of the headlights in 2 seconds flat and vanished into the darkness on the left side of the road, swallowed by the undergrowth. My hands had tightened on the steering wheel without me realizing. The car idled quietly, headlights pointed into the trees where it had disappeared. The branches there were still trembling, just slightly, as if something large had brushed through them. I sat there longer than I should have. The silence felt heavier now, as if the air itself had thickened. The rain had stopped hours ago, but droplets still slid off the trees and hit the ground with soft, steady taps. Every sound made me flinch. I forced myself to move again, easing the car forward slowly. My pulse was pounding in my ears, and I kept scanning both sides of the road, half expecting to see it again. The idea of that pale face staring out from the trees made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. A mile or so later, the woods opened up into fields again, and I finally felt like I could breathe. The fields stretched empty and flat, the fences barely visible in the dark. I remember glancing in the mirror once, just to make sure the road behind me was empty. It was, but for a brief second, the headlights caught movement again. Something shifting at the edge of the tree line behind me. I couldn't tell if it was real or if my brain was just playing tricks after what I'd seen. When I finally made it back to the village, everything was still. The streetlights glowed orange against the wet pavement, and the houses were all dark. I pulled into my driveway and just sat there, engine running, staring at nothing. My hands were shaking. Took me a while to step out and go inside. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside, the creak of branches, the scrape of the wind against the window, made me sit up and listen. The image of that face wouldn't leave my head. It wasn't like seeing something supernatural. It was worse, because it had looked real, solid, like something that existed out there, moving through the woods just beyond what people ever see. Over the next few days, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a wild animal with mange or some kind of facial deformity. Maybe a boar, though I'd never seen one move like that before. Maybe even a trick of the light, the fog, and my tired eyes combining into something that wasn't there. That explanation made sense, until I heard that others had seen something similar. It wasn't long after that when I mentioned the drive to a few friends, just offhand, and one of them froze when I described the road and the thing in the middle of it. They said a few years back, 3 of their friends had seen something strange in the same area, same kind of road, same time of night. They'd come around a bend and their headlights had caught what they called Pig Boy, a creature with a face like a mix between a human and a pig that moved like a spider before darting off into the trees. They'd laughed about it later, apparently gave it a name to make it easier to joke about, but they'd all sworn it looked real. The same round face, the same glassy eyes. Hearing that made my skin crawl. It wasn't comforting to know others had seen it. It made it worse, because it meant it wasn't just in my head. I've driven that route plenty of times since, though never that late again. I always tell myself it was just an animal, some unlucky wild thing caught in the headlights. But even years later, every time I reach that curve, I feel my hands tighten on the wheel and my foot ease off the gas, just a little. I can't help it. The memory of that face flashes in my mind, staring straight through the glass at me, still and silent. The woods there always look the same, thick, damp, heavy with fog. But sometimes, when the light hits them just right, I swear I see movement. A flicker of something low and pale, shifting between the trees. It never comes close, never steps into the road again. But it's there, watching, maybe waiting. The strange part is, locals still mention it sometimes in passing. They say "pig boy" like it's a campfire story, something you tell to scare kids into staying out of the woods. But the way some people pause before laughing, the way their eyes shift for just a second, tells me that they've seen something too. I've kept an eye out ever since that night, though I'm not sure what I'd do if I ever saw it again. Maybe stop this time, maybe try to make sense of it. Or maybe I'd just keep driving, like before, pretending it was nothing. But deep down, I know what I saw. And every time I take that road, I can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the headlights, something is still sitting in the dark, waiting for another set of tires to round that bend, another pair of headlights to find its face.